Hi everyone, welcome to the office hours here on the ViaMonstra Academy. It is Wednesday, it's 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Very welcome. This is where you learn about updates in the Intune, ConfigMgr, imaging, Azure, PowerShell, you name it. Microsoft infrastructure, on-premises as well as cloud. And shall we, Andrew?
We shall.
We shall. All right, it is a beautiful day here in Chicago. Andrew, nice to be back. Good to have you here as well.
I'm very happy to have you back. I tried to hold down the fort last week, had a lot of help from the audience. We had some great discussions, but happy to see you back here. How was your trip last week?
It was pretty awesome. For those of you who didn't know, all of the Microsoft MVPs get a chance to go to the Microsoft campus once a year for an MVP summit. They spend a few days with the product teams learning about what's about to happen in the future and what they're working on. So that was a great week. And of course, as information gets published, because 99% of the stuff that we pick up there is under NDA until it's being announced. But there is good news. There is a conference coming up shortly, Microsoft Build. Recommend signing up for that one. We will share a link to that one shortly here, but not to be missed, even if you are an IT pro. I mean, I know the conference is primarily for developers, but there will be, statistically over the years, I've always been able to pick up good information from that conference, even as an IT professional. So, good stuff. Highly recommended. And the price is just right. It's free to attend if you do it virtually. If you want to head up to Redmond and visit a few days in person, by all means do so. But then there is a little price tag to it. But yeah, what have you been up to, Andrew?
What haven't I been up to? It's been a busy couple of weeks, but happy to go through a few things today that I just happened to catch in our community over the last week. I know a lot of people, I probably mentioned this last week, a lot of people in our little sphere here gearing up for MMS next week, or we're either at the MVP Summit or PowerShell Summit, I think is going on this week as well.
Yeah.
We are definitely in conference season at the moment, which is cool. But I still have news to share if you'd like to pop over to my screen for a moment.
That sounds like a fair deal, I guess.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. So here I caught this announcement earlier today from Microsoft that they're going to be transitioning the Microsoft 365 authenticated services over to the cloud.microsoft domain. So the reason for doing that, just reviewing their this article a little bit ago, there's promise to basically streamline the experience for end users by reducing a lot of the prompts and redirects and everything that we see when we're logging into a lot of these various applications. Reduce the complexity of the allow lists required to stay secure, in your firewalls, your proxies, things like that. And then for customers and developers, as they mentioned here, sort of help make things easier to integrate with the ecosystem. It's a lot easier to say, something like star.cloud.microsoft than it is to remember all of the various links for Exchange and SharePoint and all of the various services. So I thought this was pretty cool. I know we usually try to touch on when these URLs are changing and things like that. At the moment, the expectation is only net new services will be deployed here, but over time, the existing services are going to move over to this domain as well. So curious to see what that means for in practice for our users and for us as admins. Pretty interesting. Also came across a very nice solution that I'm hoping to test here soon from Nathan McNulty. This is a version 2 of a solution that he released last year that will help you automate the cleanup of stale devices in Azure AD. And the big improvement here is that the Graph API now supports deleting devices, whereas a year ago it did not. It only supported disabling devices. So with this new updated solution that he's provided here, it's using the new Graph V2 module, PowerShell module in Azure Automation, and he's changed his solution over to using managed identities, which is kind of the way a lot of the authentication in the cloud is going these days. Or I shouldn't say in the cloud, but in Azure and Azure AD related services. So I thought this was pretty cool. Nathan, we've mentioned him on Office Hours before. Great follower, great follow on Twitter, by the way. And then last, but certainly not least, Intune 2304 was released last week. And this included the new Lapse solution integration with Intune and with Azure AD, as well as a couple of Android and Mac OS updates. And I don't believe it's in the official announcement here, but you can now delete Microsoft Store for Business apps in Intune, even if they're assigned to a group. That was not possible until this release. So those were a few of the things that I caught over the last week.
All right. I did promise to show the URL to build. So let me find that one. There we go. So again, there's an online event which is free to attend. It's only 2 days where they will basically stream those videos out like in previous years. And you can also go in person, and then it's 3 days with an additional pre-day that you can sign up for as well for workshops. So again, even if you're not a developer by trade, highly recommend to take a look at the announcements that will be done on this conference. Speaking of events, me and Ronnie Jacobson from CD Global, we just finished up a mini course here earlier today. It's called Starting Your PowerShell Journeys. If you are looking to expand your career a little bit with additional skills, this is a great starting point. We just finished it like 2 hours ago, but the recording will be available later tonight. So if you don't have any plans for tomorrow or Friday, I highly recommend to catch up on that recording. As with all our mini courses, this is a free one to attend. So the price is just right for that one. I've also been tracking lately some challenges organizations have been having with the new updates types that were created for Windows 11 updates, and the April CU was the very first one to be issued with that one. So let's see if I can find the resources I was looking for there. Just a moment. Had literally a second ago. I have too many windows. That's the truth.
Common problem for us IT folks, I think.
A little bit, yeah. Where the heck did I go? It's one of those ones. This is it.
Yesterday I noticed my system was running a little sluggish, and this workstation has 64 gigs of RAM in it, and Firefox was using 20 gigs.
There you go.
Impressive, I thought.
Yeah. Okay, I found the link. So just to give you some background information here, there was a new release of ConfigMgr current branch that we touched upon earlier in office hours. And in this release, there is also support for a new update type for Windows 11 updates primarily. And again, the April CU for Windows 11 was one of the first patches to come with that platform, and that's going to be that platform going forward. So this will be this one here. And I've seen some threads going on in the community. Organizations are actually having troubles getting this one out the door. And let me see if I can find the main thread on that one. This one here was one I was following. I don't need you, but I need you. So this one's here. Basically, if you are seeing issues with the Windows 11 CU from April, this particular KB, it could very well be that there are some issues in the environment that needs to be addressed for this. This was someone had to go through Microsoft support to get that solved. So it was a good read around their troubleshooting progress if you follow this information here. I also saw a tweet from Panu, one of the ConfigMgr MVPs. They were on an older version of ConfigMgr, but they were also having struggles getting that patch out. In general, I do not recommend to do Delta updates because it has a history of breaking stuff. And after a while, depending on the version of the client, you actually did not need to configure that setting. So to show you what I mean here is that this is obviously a client setting, but a while ago, Microsoft, see if I can get into this one. I was running out of disk space on all my hosts earlier, or on this major host. So I had to run a dedupe job to claim all that disk space back. So I have to restart all my servers and whatnot. But I just got them up and running before our presentation earlier today. So that was good. But if I go to my software update point here, and go to update files. In general, this one here is stay away from it. It's been known for causing havoc around distribution of packages or deployments or both. And yes, continue to use this one here. And as far as I know, you are not required to configure any Delta updates in client settings to get support for the Windows 11 packages, and Panu's post kind of indicated that. But as we learn more about this, we'll absolutely share more information about this in office hours. But just a heads up, if you are having struggles with the new Windows 11 CU that is using this new platform in ConfigMgr, make sure you're up on 23.03 on ConfigMgr and that you have updated your clients to that version as well. It may work on earlier versions, but, well, you need to upgrade anyway at some point, so why not? All right, that's all I had there. But I remember you had some shiny things to present or show.
I would like to think so. I actually close a few hundred of my tabs here as well. But planning, as you are very familiar with, planning and working through MMS demos and slides and everything for next week. Nothing like the last minute, right?
That's where you get the best. All right, let's see if I can find your screen here again. There we go.
All right, sounds good. So just wanted to kind of cover a quick few things that I noted on the new Labs deployment. So I did try to go through this over the weekend, both with storing the admin password up in Azure AD as well as in AD. So I've found a couple of gotchas, if you will, but I would say that in my initial testing, very easy to get this enabled as long as you know what to look out for. And the integration with Intune is very nice. So 2 things to kind of prep for laps. One is in Azure AD, if you're going to use the Azure AD integration, you can either go here in the Entra portal and go to all devices and device settings. And then there is this new setting here, enable Azure AD local administrator password solution, yes or no. By default, it's turned off. But if you do want to use that integration, come here, turn that on. Pretty easy. And then on the AD side, I actually shared a link last week from Kaido that shows how to extend the schema for using laps in on-prem AD. So I will actually go ahead and drop that in the links again on YouTube here for today. But pretty straightforward. Follow his blog post, extremely easy, and you'll have the schema extended. But sticking here in Azure AD and Intune, if we pop over to the Intune portal, and go to endpoint security, account protection. Here I have a policy. There's a new policy type, local admin password solution. You can just see basically it refers to Windows Labs here, which is what the new version is called, Windows Labs. So if I click on this policy, see I've got it assigned to several devices already. And if we go and check out what settings are available to us, we have a couple of things. Here we can configure the backup directory. So either we do not back up the password, not configured by default. We can back up the password to Azure AD, or we can back up the password to AD if you have a hybrid Azure AD joined device. So in this case, I'm just backing the password up to Azure AD. We can configure the password age in days. So I just have this happen to configure this for 90 days. We can set a different administrator account name. Now, here's where 2 things I came across kind of tripped me up, but actually it popped up in the event viewer pretty easily. By default, if you don't set this setting, it's going to use the built-in administrator account. Well, if you go through Autopilot, for example, that administrator account is going to be disabled. So before configuring this, if you're going to use the built-in administrator account, you have to somehow get that enabled. If you do configure a custom administrator account name here, you have to actually create the local account ahead of time somehow. This solution is not going to create it for you. So those were 2 things that I ran into. But again, if you happen to forget that or you're testing this, if you look in the event viewer under the lapse events, that showed up pretty obviously to me. Then we can set the different password complexity rules here. You can see what those are, various combinations of large and small letters, numbers, special characters, the length of the password. And then there are some post-authentication actions here. So this basically is after you log off, if you use this new local admin password, after you log off, there are a number of options that can happen, such as resetting the password after it's been used once. So these are some cool options here. And then you can set the delay, how long it will be before those actions happen. And then from here, you just assign it to a group of computers in Azure AD. Now, on the other side, if I go on-prem here, before I do that, I'm sorry, I should show what this looks like for one of our devices. I can go over to, let's go with this device here. So if I go to my device that has the lapse solution assigned to it, the profile assigned to it, I'll have this now local admin password. Now, if it does have a policy assigned, this will show up here. Otherwise, it will say no local admin password assigned. But we can click on show password. We can see the account name that's being used, the SID of the account name. Here we could show the password, and then it shows the last time the password was rotated and the next time the password is going to be rotated. So pretty simple UI there. Now, if we go on-prem, what I have here, just log in over here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and open up group policy management. And so I have two settings, or two GPOs that I've created here. One to store my passwords in Azure AD. So this is already showing up in in group policy. And we can see what that looks like here. So this is going to look similar to what I just showed you within Intune. But then I also have this on-prem config, and this configuration is allowing my devices to back up their password to Active Directory. So I've already gone through and extended the schema. I have created a policy that allows me to back up to AD. We can set the number of passwords that are stored in the history. And then I believe these two settings are brand new. This will enable password backup for directory services recovery accounts, which is great. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. And we can encrypt the passwords. So we go ahead and create that GPO, assign it. And then if we go to one of our devices, so let me go to a domain controller, for example. I'll get the lapse tab, and here we can see some of that additional information that we saw on the Azure AD side as well. So we see the current expiration, which I've made very short in AD, 7 days as compared to the 90 in Azure AD. No real reason for me setting those timelines, just testing and playing around in the lab. I could expire that password right now, and you can see that the actual DSRM account has been stored for this domain controller, which is pretty cool. A couple of things that I noted on the on-prem side of things is that had to add specific permissions for the computers to update their own lapse information. So anything outside of the domain controllers were able to do it right away. But other than that, it was pretty straightforward. The one other thing that I do want to note is that to get these policies for lapse, they are not in the current ADMX templates that you can download for Windows 10 or Windows 11. You actually have to go to a device that's been updated with the April CU, where Windows Lapse is built in. Go to the Windows directory policy definitions and grab the Lapse ADMX and ADML and upload them to the central store if you want to be able to configure it through GPMC in your domain. So a couple of little things there. Johan may have to convince me to write a little blog post after MMS or something to get through these couple of gotchas. But I did want to share what I've found so far, and hopefully this will help you on your journey testing this new solution. Pretty nice. I actually really like how easy it is to configure. There's no MSIs to install or anything like that.
Yeah, as long as you have the April patch, you're good in terms of updates. And it's nice. And thank you, Andrew. And I will remind you to create that blog post. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, I see we have a few questions coming in the chat here. One was from Robert here, and that was regarding the PowerShell journey that I showed earlier, that mini course that we just did earlier today. It will be available later tonight. We are editing the video as we speak, basically, and it will be uploaded later this evening, so you can log in either then or early tomorrow morning and check it out. It's an hour and a half training on PowerShell. And there was a follow-up question to that also regarding I'm trying to use VS Code to design a front end or a UI in some sort. And I have not used VS Code to create UI interfaces in PowerShell, even though it's perfectly doable to do so. I have been using a third-party tool called PowerShell Studio. Let me steal your screen, Andrew, and see if I can find that one. So this is one of the older versions, 2021. I just hadn't upgraded this machine with it, but this is a very simple tool to create PowerShell GUIs, and in my opinion, it's the best and easiest tool if you need to create UIs or VPM forms in various shapes or form. So it's a paid solution, but it's not terrible. The pricing is around $20-25 a month, give or take, and you get it a little bit cheaper if you sign up for the annual subscription for it. But it will save you so much time in creating user interfaces in PowerShell, because if you're trying to do this in code only, it's not one line of code. Put it that way. We're using a similar wizard in our PSD solution, the PowerShell deployment kit. We have a little front end that takes you through selecting a sequence, typing a computer name, and all that stuff. And if I would open up that wizard in just a regular PowerShell editor, let's see what I have here available. I can borrow. Let me get that repository over here. So this is the SAML file that controls the behavior of the wizard, where all the different buttons and combo boxes and things are. And that's just the definition file. And then you have file that calls those. We have a module for that. And that's a good chunk of PowerShell code as well. And then we have the entire wizard modules themselves that are quite advanced code. We actually had help from Dick Tracy. He worked for Microsoft. He goes under PowerShell crack on GitHub, but he helped us create a responsive wizard, multi-threaded, that refreshes different parts of the wizard depending on what you click on. And when you start to scroll through this script here, stuff like this is not really something you want to write completely from scratch. It's usually useful to get some help with this, and I like to use Sapien for that purpose. But yeah, it can be done. It's just challenging to get it done, say the least. Anyhow, I hope I answered that question there.
All right. We've got another question coming in on YouTube from Isaac. Is there a process to migrate BitLocker escrow from on-prem AD to ConfigMgr? May eventually get them into Intune, but still have to convince management.
So you mean migrate the actual of the existing keys? I have not seen anything for that, and also in the ConfigMgr Bitlocker management, if you set it up here, let's see what I have. if you start to use this for your BitLocker settings, those keys will be stored in the ConfigMgr database, and that will be stored encrypted in the ConfigMgr database. Whereas the old MBAM solution didn't have them encrypted in the same way. I don't think there is an option to migrate existing keys over. It's more like applying these settings and force the client to escrow keys into this platform. That would be the way to go. So it's not a migration per se of keys. It's more like, all right, every client needs to generate new keys and put them into this database. If anyone has stumbled across a way to migrate keys over, by all means, let us know. But I just don't see how that would be possible, because this platform needs to know about that process. I did have some PowerShell script at some point that would peek into this. I wonder where I've kept those. Let's see if I can find them. There was a gentleman who figured out how to read those in clear text. Yeah, this one here. We share these links as usual, but this was the one when I tested this. I wanted to see the exact keys. So there is a bit of PowerShell you can run to get recovery keys showing up in clear text in the environment if you should need to. So yeah, maybe that.
Cool. Good stuff. We've got a lot of options for BitLocker recovery keys these days, and it can get confusing with so many options, I think.
Yeah, they can be in Azure AD, they can be available on the Intune device object, they can be in ConfigMgr, it can be in Legacy Active Directory, it can be in a text file somewhere, and on OneDrive, depending on.
Yep, text file somewhere. That wouldn't be the first time I've encountered that. Spreadsheet somewhere.
Let's see, what else? There was a question from Matt regarding, so during our session earlier today, we offered a discount code on one of our PowerShell courses on the Academy. And the question was, is that available for other courses? Unfortunately, it's not. It was only for that specific course that we offered a discount, and that for the people that signed up and joined us through the webinar earlier today. All right. Anything else showing up?
Not that I see at the moment. There was something last week that came up, a question that came in from LinkedIn. I don't know if you even have a solution for this, and we didn't get the chance to talk before office hours. But with the WinRE patch that came out earlier this year, I think that was is there any way that you're aware of to report on the WinRE versions that are out there on devices? I was not able to come up with anything.
I mean, there is always no ready-made report for it, because you need to actually mount the file to see what's in it. But you should be able to borrow the same script that you guys use to update the boot image with a little bit of creativity, you can use that as a basis to figure out how to read from that information, and either just save that out in a summary file somewhere, or write a registry key with that information that you then do a little bit of an inventory on in ConfigMgr, or if you have a proactive remediation script in Intune to get additional inventory and report on that. So, but I haven't seen any ready-made report that does that, because it does require that you run the script on the client to be able to peek inside of that WinRE file to be able to make sure that it's installed. Don't remember if the patching script actually made a note somewhere that it had updated the script.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head either. Let's see if I can find it here.
Phew, I was able to mute that one. That was a good sneeze. Your headset would have exploded.
Yeah, those are going around here in the spring. Those big sneezes.
Yeah, I definitely got that from my dad. It's a big sneezer, or loud sneezer, I should say. Let's see, Bitlocker, WinRE, PowerShell.
So it does find. I do have it up, Johan. I can.
Oh, beautiful! Thank you, sir. Let's see, get here. There we go.
So I was getting to a point later on here in the script. It looked like it checked.
This was one of my gripings, how they could post scripts here in the support article with no highlighting, no GitHub, no nothing. Luckily, the community came together and shared it elsewhere. So
I should have found that one first. Oh, here's what I was looking for, though. At least I'd gotten to this point before I started sharing. After patch, so there's a log message after patch, find expected version for target file. So it does look like it does log some of that. And so to your point, it looks like it does grab some of that version information here. And then logs it. Looks like some halfway decent logging in this script too. Of course, maybe I'm so used to seeing solutions that have no logging whatsoever. My baseline is what I can't tell. I don't know if you've run this many times or not at this point, but I can't tell if this is just logging to the host or if it's actually logging to a file. Oh, it's just logging to the host. So yeah, I think that's a great thought. I think you might be onto something, being able to just tailor this to grab that information and somehow store it somewhere rather than just logging it to the host.
all right, then. That will be our answer.
Thank you for that. That was much more helpful than I couldn't find anything last week. All right. Matt is asking if you use the %dp0 for the path of an application. Do you prefer it? If not, what are you using for the path?
I use PowerShell. I do not use batch files unless I can absolutely avoid it. Have been exceptions, but those are very, very rare. And PowerShell supports much better working directories than batch files ever did. So the particular command in question, I can bring it up on the screen here if I can steal your screen. So this one here was very common to use as, without the stupid quotes, to set the working directory to the current directory in batch files. But in PowerShell, it's much easier. You can even have a UNC path as being a working directory or something that batch files does not support. So I would simply just do a big and use a PowerShell script instead. Something like that. May not be the answer you were looking for, but if you absolutely must use batch file, yeah, that's a valid solution, but again, don't. All right.
Fair enough, I think. All right. And I did find, just a slight sidebar, I did find that WinRE update script on GitHub that you mentioned. The community shared it out there. So I'm going to drop that in the YouTube links for today.
Perfect.
All right. Vert is asking on YouTube, what should be the first steps after spinning up a configuration manager lab? I would say it depends on what you want to do, what you're trying to accomplish in your lab first. Might want to bring up put some images in there first. Might be one of the first things I would do.
Yeah, I mean, there are something that organizations always do. If they set up a config manager lab, it's usually because they want to start doing something with the software distribution. Mm-hmm. They want to deploy an image or an application or a software update, something. That's like the number one reason to get config manager. So that would be my first step, to set up config manager for software distribution. Meaning make sure I have at least one distribution point, one management point, and possibly a reporting server to get some reports out of the mix, and then starting adding things like boundaries and boundary groups, creating applications, creating packages, adding images, creating boot images, creating sequences, start to deploy stuff. But that like base foundation setup, I would highly recommend. I have a shameless plug, but I'm not particularly ashamed of it because it's free content for the community, and free is good. I established that already. So let's see if I can steal my screen here a little bit. Up on the Academy, as well as on my blog, or our blog, because you're posting stuff there also. And when you sign up for our newsletter, here, this one, also free, you get access to 2 guides, 70-some pages ebooks that will take you through step by step through that initial config manager setup, including optimizations for SQL and whatnot to just make it reasonably fast, because the default setup is suboptimal. Let's see if I have a copy of it here somewhere. I should leave it around. Here we go. So this is the ebook, and in module 6, this is take you through everything you need in config manager for, in this case, for imaging. But imaging is part of software distribution, so you have to configure config manager for that anyway. And it will give you 20-some, 30-some pages here on what you need to do and to get everything going. So I would start with this. takes about 2 hours to get through the setup because there's a lot of things you need to do. But it's a very straightforward, well-proven guide. So highly recommend that one.
Must say the price is right for those.
Can't beat that.
No. Pretty darn good resources too. I've mentioned before, long before you and I were doing this together, I was using these same resources myself, and got me here on office hours with Johan. So
there you go.
There's my plug for it. All right. Good stuff. Matt had a follow-up question about the working directory. Question: what's the command in PowerShell?
Well, usually you just put a variable into where the script is, so like the p script root variable or something like that. That would be. So basically, the script knows from where you run it, and you can ask ConfigMgr for that location, and that is usually how I set my working directory. Let's see if I can find a good documentation about that. Yeah, here we go. This is for PowerShell 7, but most of these are available also in Windows PowerShell. This guess here, so you have the PS script root somewhere in this mix. Yeah. So that would be where I would start. But again, it's not the only option you can do. It's usually there are like 4 billion things to do things with, or 4 billion ways.
Definitely. A lot of options again.
Yeah.
All right. Another question from Jamal on YouTube. Speaking of lab, how would you allocate memory? I have 96 gigs of RAM and dedicated 16 gigs and 2 cores to ConfigMgr, but still running slow. Any suggestions on how to improve performance?
Yeah, so for lab environment, 16 gigs is often quite okay for ConfigMgr, but 2 virtual CPU is not enough. So first of all, you need a decent Hyper-V host to run stuff on. This, I will say, is absolute bare minimum. It's a good starting point. No. Long story short, when you set up site servers for ConfigMgr, I happen to have a few here that I've been playing around with. I've been able to get really good performance out of a 16 gig memory VM, but I have to assign at least 4 CPUs to it. So 2 is not enough. And also inside of that VM, let's see if I can go into that one. No, get away. Good Lord. Yeah, that will help me configure enhanced session mode by going into the virtual switch. This is annoyance in Hyper-V that this one is enabled by default, but this one is not. Then you need both to be able to do enhanced session mode. But anyhow, that's when you get the shiny screen resolutions and copy paste and other good stuff.
That make your life much easier.
Yeah, and this is now the third time I'm trying to type in the right password. And it's not a very complicated password. Anyhow, if you open up SQL Server Management Studio, and of course, having a recent SQL is critical as well. There is a night and day difference in performance compared with an old SQL Server 2010 or 2014 compared to either 2017, 2019, or even the new 2022 that just got support in the latest ConfigMgr release, because they were all built in a virtualized era, so to speak, a time frame where everything is optimized for being run in a virtual environment. I remember a day back in the early SMS and ConfigMgr days that organizations would deploy physical devices with SQL just to get performance out of it. That is long gone. But anyhow, in your SQL, make sure that you cap memory usage of it. So the default settings, like these are here, this is from a default setup. Not even my shiniest of shiny lab machine has 2 terabytes of available memory yet. So I would recommend to throw this as the minimum supported memory and put it up to 10 to 40 whoops as a maximum use. So this one here will make a difference in performance. Also going in and spinning up additional temp directory, temp files will make a massive performance even in a lab. So make sure that your temp database, this one here, is configured with multiple files. You can bump up the size a bit. In the lab, you typically don't have to, but the key is to have as many of these as you have CPUs assigned to the VM. ConfigMgr does somewhere between 30 and 50% of all its writes into these files. And if you only have one, well, it's going to be very, very limited. So memory limit, some temp DB optimization, and of course, completely ignore and never ever use the indexing task that is available here. It is not good. Find something that is. And in that case, that would be the maintenance solution from Ola Hallengren. SQL maintenance Ola. Here. And implement that one. Basically, if you go into your lab environment and you, let's see where I have that one. I mean, these are the same type of optimizations as you do for production environments. Mm-hmm. They are equally important in a lab. But if I open up a SQL script here that checks for fragmentation, and I pick one of my older databases and check it, don't need you, of course. This is not good. This is in any shape or form not good. If you have large tables that has a large page count that has a fragmentation level of this, yeah, congratulations, it's going to be slow. Run a defrag job, go back and check, it's going to be better. And then schedule them to run once or twice a week in your lab. So, long answer, but that's what you have to do to get some performance out of your lab. If you are planning on software updates, sorry, you have to give the machine a little bit more memory because software updates and the WSUS application pool is quite aggressive. So either set up a separate sub or give your site server more memory, even for a lab. That's all.
Good stuff. I was wondering your opinion on 2 things. What if the VMs are running on a hard disk instead of an SSD or an NVMe drive?
I mean, basically everything but an NVMe disk is the wrong disk. So make sure you have a quick, speedy hard drive.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a bigger improvement than even going to a newer, faster processor with more cores or anything. And
I actually did some benchmarking on that recently, just for the fun of it. I was playing around with a new hard drive. I bought 2 of these One burned up the other week, so I had to send it back for replacement, but the other one is still going strong. Anyhow, I was testing different adapter cards. So even if you have a workstation type chassis that is older, that may not have an M2 adapter or M2 slot for it, you can buy a $20 card from Amazon, and it will give you great performance. I got some fantastic read and write on these guys.
Yeah, that's pretty
this
great.
is good. Yeah.
Awesome. We do have one last question here with 2 minutes left to go. And they asked it a little while ago, so I don't want to waste any more time talking. In an MDT deployment, when the PC does not have the SSD as disk 0, but as 1, finding MDT runs into issues applying the OS to the correct disk. Have you run into this before?
Yes.
I had a feeling that you might have.
No, MDT doesn't have any built-in logic to detect that. So when we've been working with some of our customers running the PowerShell extension to MDT, we actually added in additional logic to allow you to specify bus type to be the prioritized disk. So you can say if it finds an NVMe SSD or it found a bus type or a disk that is an SSD, it will prioritize that one over something else. But MDT doesn't have any of that logic built in, so you have to script it yourself. Or you steal some of the PowerShell script we used for PSD and leverage them. But it is a known challenge. I even seen some organizations, they simply just rip away everything but the right disk when they deploy the device, and then they put in other disks when they're done. That's also obviously a solution, but it's more elegant to add in a script that allows you to either select or detect which disk it's supposed to be using based on some sort of priority list, and then leverage that.
Good stuff.
Yep.
And it looks like 5:30 to me.
Dang. Time flies.
Yeah, it does.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all the great questions. Thank you, Andrew, once again for having me back the other week and for being with us here today. And we'll see you guys next week, where we somehow will try to do this live from MMS. We will see how that goes, but we are going to give it a go. What can possibly go wrong on a conference Wi-Fi network?
Nothing. It's going to be fine.
Beautiful.
All right.
I have a backup plan, though. It's this one here. It's a little AT&T hotspot. So,
perfect.
see you guys next week.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.